at that time, but he also had a full-time job working for his family in Wilmington. He was the plant director of the operations in Wilmington and would get up every morning at 5 o'clock after he'd been working at the club till 12 or 1, get in the car, drive to Wilmington, and that went on for several years. And finally, he ended up hiring a driver because we were all scared to death that he was going to end up in a ditch falling asleep or something. But they all had quite tremendous work ethic. It was really amazing. Now, at that point in 66 and 67, the Beach Club was really going strong thanks to Uncle Cecil's connections in the music industry. The summer weeks were filled with tremendously talented entertainers, and many of you hopefully remember seeing them. There were many methods of getting the word out regarding the acts playing at the Beach Club, especially local DJs, some of which are here tonight to share some, or this afternoon to share some of their stories. And the other efforts, because back then there was no cell phone, no internet, no nothing. But these were the major ways of putting the information out for the counties all around Myrtle Beach for people to see. The other really critical element of the advertising were these handbills, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's see. I'm sure a lot of people here that saw and enjoyed many of these acts, but for those who didn't, let me briefly share with you what it was like. In 1963, the concrete building, which is now Bennett's Calabash Seafood, opened its doors in its new location. It was about 400 to 500 yards north of the Shrine Club. It sits at the intersection of Lake Arrowhead Road and Highway 17. Back then, there were very few businesses between Myrtle Beach and Windy Hill. There was the Shrine Club, and then there was Serpent City, and then there was the new Beach Club. And across the street from the Beach Club was a little store called Watson's Store. Now, at Serpent City, a man named King Martin ran that joint, and a lot of people knew him. He was quite a fella, and he had venomous snakes and reptiles, and he had a special friend named Gus. I think David might speak to Gus's involvement. And the famous couple he had there were two monkeys named Lady Bird and Lyndon. And on their cue, they got very romantic, if you know what I mean. So across the street from the Beach Club was Watson's Corner Store. It was a little grocer, and I believe it had a couple of gas pumps. One quick story. I was probably the most embarrassed I'd ever been. I defied my father and went across to the Watson's to get a Welch's Grape drink, some red pistachios, and some Vienna sausages. That was my favorite thing. I could hear my dad yell for me to come back, and I openly defied him. He sent one of the doormen over there to get me. He said, "You better get back across the street." Dad said, "Follow me." We walked to the back of the club. There was a tree with some branches on it and a switch. He took the switch off and got the leaves off of it and proceeded to whip me with the switch. And that hurt a little bit, but really hurt was the fact that at the time it was intermission, the side doors were open, and all these cool kids saw me getting a little whipping. I think it was the last time I openly defied my dad, for sure. Now, right north of the Beach Club, there were a couple of residences owned by the Chestnut family, many of which still live in that area right now. And there was a little motel next to Watson's called the Star Motor Court. And that pretty much, I think, made up most of the businesses that existed between the Dunes Club and Windy Hill. Now, the Beach Club was a building that was about 60 feet wide and 110 feet deep. Initially, it was not air-conditioned, and by no means was it fancy. It had a concrete floor and some wood slat chairs as you walked in. There was a ladies' room to the left. And the most iconic part of it for me as a little kid was the wall there as you walked in and paid. Betty Ann, Karen's mom, had taken that wall and covered it with covers, album covers from 50 or 60 different acts. And it was just a really a cool piece to see. Now, once you walk through the entry doors right here, the men's room was over here, and then the bar was right here on the corner. Now, the bar was a very important part of the operation, obviously, and the bar was run by Aunt Betty Ann and my mother. And they only served one thing, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer on tap. I don't know how Sonny Stevens able to manipulate that contract, but he got the only action at the Beach Club for a long, long time. Now, the back was a very, very small stage, and two dressing rooms flanked it, and they weren't at all fancy. I think this one, I remember, had a mirror on it and a little bathroom. This one didn't have either. And that's where the major acts would dress. And there were two. Looking back at the astonishing part of that was in the early days, it wasn't air conditioned. And couldn't you imagine on a busy night with 400 to 500 to 600 kids in there dancing and drinking hot and crazy it was? But in this picture, you can see this is my mom and dad dancing, but you can look closely at the open rafters. Everything was open up there. It was, and they had fans. Back then, they had big exhaust fans that would try to keep it cool. I can recall as a little kid being in the dressing rooms when the Tams played. Joe Pope was a very kind man, and he and I had a great relationship, and he'd let me go into the dressing room and hang out with him in between sets. The astonishing part about that is that I was witnessing Joe Pope, Robert, and Horace argue and yell at each other about miscues and they missed dance steps and miscues about when to bribe in, when to chime in. And I was looking at grown men yelling and screaming at each other about missing dance steps. I said, that's crazy. Well, one of the key elements of advertising was the distribution of these cards that held the summer lineup. You'll hear more about that a little bit from Karen. But that summer that we returned from Louisiana, I was about 9 to 10 years old, and I recall being dropped off at 30th Avenue with about 200 of those handbills by Leon Fumble. He was a lifeguard and also a part-time worker at the club. And all of us had to do that. Karen and her sister Kelly and all of us as little kids would hand these things out on the beach to anybody and everybody. Many times the lifeguards would get a big stack of them, giving them an entree to tell a pretty girl about a club and maybe meet him up there later. In any event, I made it to the pavilion. I was out of cards, and I sat down and I waited for Leon, and I waited, and I waited, and he never showed. So I said, what am I going to do? Because we had just moved there. I didn't know the telephone number of the house that my mom and dad had just bought, and really was at a loss about what to do, but I knew I was hungry. So I watched the phone booths at the wall of the pavilion, and about every 10 or 15 minutes I'd go over there and scoop up the loose coins that people forgot. So I finally saved enough money to get a hot dog at Peach's Corner, and boy, was it good. Being almost a mama's boy, around 7 o'clock, my mother goes, "Where's my son?" And Leon, in a panic, jumps up, guts in his car, and probably breaks every law for speeding to get to the pavilion down in Myrtle Beach to pick me up and bring me to the club. That next summer, I worked for Jim Mayer as a beach monkey at 3rd Avenue for Vernon Beach Service. The chairs weighed twice as much as I did, and I was very challenging, so I was thinking I would take on a new job. That's when I met Joe McVeigh at the beach club. He hung out there a lot. And he inquired where I was working and did I have the skills to handle money. I said, of course I did. And he put me to work at Lake Arrowhead. Now that's important because after my shift at Lake Arrowhead, he dropped me off at the beach club. And that could catch the second act of a lot of those acts after the first one. And on the nights that I didn't work at the beach club, I worked there parking cars. I quickly learned how to break in with a coat hanger in cars because a lot of these kids were so excited about being there when they pulled up, they'd forget everything else and lock the keys in the car, so I'd always pick up a little extra money offering to get into their car for them. You didn't have a locksmith that you could call on the cell number. So, it was a great time. I always remember riding shotgun with a older than me, but a guy named Kevin Jensen. Many of you may remember the Jensen family. Yeah. Fleming Jensen owned motels. They had 2 older brothers. Kevin worked at the club a lot, and he would travel along with Chuck and me and others and put these posters up on telephone poles. Now, I wasn't tall enough to staple them, but I carried them and handed them to them and walked through ditches and would get with the telephone poles and just had a lot of fun. But that was really one of the main ways to get the word out. That's also when I learned to drive. He had a new Volkswagen Bug, and I would drive it around the dirt parking lot of the club, mastering the 4-clutch speed. And then, as it advanced on, I'll never forget when I was about 13 in 1970, I remember getting into the car used by the band Can Heat. I don't know if you ever remember that band or not. But boy, I got in the car and it was smoke filled with a scent I had never smelled. I called one of the other guys over there and said, "What is that?" He goes, "That is marijuana." So, needless to say, through my eyes, growing up at the beach club was an experience that I'll never forget. And I really want to just give a great shout out to my mom and dad and my brothers and my family here, because it was quite a time when it was just magical, really. These people that played there, like the Platters, I mean, they were so smooth and so calm and so poised and just a tremendous professional act. And someone said, well, which ones were your favorite? I said, gosh, I don't know. I have about 5. I think the Platters, the Drifters, and then you gotta love Billy Stewart, the big fat guy, Billy Stewart. He'd swing that microphone. He was quite an entertainer. The Tams, because of their famous song, I'll never forget. It sticks in my mind as we speak. Be young, be foolish, but be happy. And that's a big part of our life. We all should try to do that. Be young, be foolish, and be happy. But just don't get in trouble being foolish. The other band I think was my favorite, by hands down, was Jackie Wilson. Good gosh, the man could dance and move like no tomorrow. I can remember him. He didn't tear his shirt off, but it would be as off as it could be without coming off. And him just making moves and getting that place so riled up, they almost hung from the rafters. It was quite a fun time. Well, thank you for indulging me in a little bit of this history. I'm going to ask David, my brother, to come up and make a few comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Kenneth. And I just want to thank each and every one of y'all for coming out today to bring back some of the great memories that we had. And as a sign, I would like for everyone just to bow their head and thank the good Lord for what my dad and my uncle were able to do by bridging communities and bridging cultures. So, amen. Ushers, pass the collection basket. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but I was writing down and just making some notes of different aspects of the beach club. The jobs that I had were Chuck, my brother, and I would get up in the morning and with the hose and wash the water all around and get squeegees and push the beer and the cans out the side door, load them up in the trash cans, and let it dry out, and then it was ready for the next day. Flashlight brigade. That was very nice. Because I get in the back, and I didn't understand what a car that was doing this at night. Until I looked in one time and I said, oh, back away from that. You know, talking about that stage was small, and I would hang out back here and just look out and talk, to some of the band members and stuff like that. And then at the very end, on top of the cooler, we ended up getting a spotlight of which I would use to, put on whether it was a big band or a spot or a flood kind of thing on it. There's some artists that I would like to talk about. Jerry Butler. Jerry Butler, the Iceman. Came to Myrtle Beach, didn't have a room. Couldn't find a room. Went to Atlantic Beach, and he said, I'll never stay there again. I don't know. I wasn't with him. So, speaking of Jackie Wilson, I remember going in the dressing room and sitting with Jackie Wilson, and Jackie had an alcohol problem. However, Dad and Uncle Cecil would escort him up those 4 steps onto the stage, and they would hold him till he got on stage. He took the cigarette, spun it, threw it down, spun it, and it was like magic. He didn't miss a beat. He didn't miss a lid. He didn't miss anything. The Drifters. Kenneth said a minute ago, the Chestnut family had, a lot of the property around. Well, one night, it was Johnny Moore and the Recording Drifters, and I was on the front little entry area up here, and Bill Frederick was the big, tall guy that was the bass. And we were tussling around and something like that, And Tom Chestnut was drunk as he could be, and came up and yelled to Bill, and I'm not going to say the word, "Get your hands off that white boy." And Bill loaded back and hit Tom Chestnut and knocked him flat on the concrete floor. And Mom and Aunt Betty Ann out there trying to, they didn't call the ambulance or anything back then. So then somebody called Dad, who was up at the Spartanburg Peach Orchard, to come to Myrtle Beach. Dad drove all the way from Spartanburg that night to unruffle some of the feathers with Tom Chestnut so that nothing ever happened, and the show went on the next night as usual. The band that I took really liking to were the Four Tops. This picture was, I think, 1965 or 66 when it was originally autographed.
66.
40 years later, I took this picture to one of their shows, because I would go see them often, and they looked at the picture and looked how young we looked and everything like that, and couldn't believe it, and re-autographed it. And almost every time I went, and the last time I went was in Charlotte before Duke, the last guy, died. They would always, at some point in the show, acknowledge Dad and Uncle Cecil as being pioneers of bringing them and other Motown acts to the Beach Club back at the height of segregation in the early and mid '60s. And he would say his son's here tonight, and that kind of stuff, and that really made me feel good and everything. Now I'm going to talk about a couple people, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone in here if I miss somebody that had a real connection to the Beach Club with you. The first one, and the most important one, was a guy named Wilson Howard that Uncle Cecil hired from the Coachman and Four in Bennettsville from a guy named Gene Crow. And what happened was that Uncle Cecil would buy entertainment for the week at the Beach Club. He would sell the Coachman and Four a couple of days before or after a place in Raleigh called, I'm sorry, it slips in mind, I can't think of it.
Cat's eye.
Other eye.
Other eye.
The Other Eye?
Cat's eye too.
There was a guy nicknamed Oka, Terry Rhodes. Terry Rhodes became a big shot with International Creative Management in New York City. And he never left, Myrtle Beach. It always was in his heart. And there were a couple times I would go up to the city, and Terry would invite me to the Oak Room at the Plaza. We'd have a drink, talk about Dad and Uncle Cecil and the days that they had fun there. There was a guy named Bubba Zachary, Skipper Huff, also known as Water Dog. Harry Driver, if y'all remember him, had a number of groups, the Men of Distinction, they came and played a lot. They were opening acts for a lot of it. There was also Debbie Scott that ended up working for Uncle Cecil at Hillside Drive in North Myrtle Beach, and then on at the Beach Club. Then there was the guy, Dallas Sowell, that Uncle Cecil and Dad leased the Beach Club to the year that they closed it. And they took it back over the next year. He did such a horrible job, and then ended up selling it to William Hoffman. And so there. Now behind the scenes, there was Herbert Hux, who was a security guy. We didn't have big security. And a man named Joe, if anybody knows Joe's last name, Whitmire. There you go.
Write it down. Write it down.
Okay. There was Woody Mills. Woody Mills was a tax man. Every night, Woody stood right there, and every ticket that was torn, he made a note of it because he was going to make sure that they made fair share of paying their taxes to the South Carolina Tax Commission. Kenneth mentioned earlier Sonny Stevens had the PBR distributor. There were a number of occasions where they would call Sonny. He would hop in the van, go load up cases of beer, bring them to the Beach Club. They were hot. but it didn't matter. People didn't care. They was wanting something to drink. And then there was Leon and Stephen Earl Fondle from Tabor City that were an integral part. There was a guy named Go Boy, Ralph Harrison, Jerry McElveen. And then Mr. Anderson, whose family has been an integral part of the Beach Club for a long time. There was a guy named Lynn Noy, Bunky Odom, who Bunky Odom was from Laurinburg, went on to be a big shot with the Allman Brothers Band later on. Now, there were some guys out of the University of Georgia. Pat Williams, also known as Twiggy. There was 3 guys that played on the football team, a guy named Jake Scott, Bill Stanfield, and Bobby Poss. Jake Scott and Bill Stanfield hung out behind the bar with Mama till they could get somebody to date and dance with, and then they were through. Jake and Bill were the 2 members on the 1972 undefeated Miami Dolphins football team. So, then there was a guy named Charlie Miner that went to the University of Georgia, came back to the Beach Club one year, and he walked by me and I smelled this cologne. And I said, man, what in the world? I said, Charlie, what is that cologne? He said, it's called Aramis. Well, British sterling, brewed, English leather, and I don't know what else. So Charlie Monty gave me a little bit of Aramis, and for 6 years, I was the only guy in Myrtle Beach to wear Aramis. You couldn't find it at Nelson's Men's Shop, Bivens Men's Shop, Richard D. Wade Men's Shop, Belk or anywhere else. So, you know, I still wear that cologne to this day. There was the Horry County Police. There was Detective Ellis Bellamy that would come up and they would hang out. Clinch Henry Pimenta, and a name y'all all recommend or recognize was Olin Blanton, who later became magistrate. Olin was one of the Horry County policemen that would ride by and just make a presence. They rarely ever went in. They would just sit there and talk in the car and stuff. Kenneth has already mentioned King Martin and Reynolds Martin, and there's one other thing that I would like to say, that my mom and dad invited the Four Tops to our house on 71st. They had a little card table chair set up in the living room with 4 chairs, and my mother cooked dinner or a late lunch for them before they went to the beach club. And then, a lot of people don't know this, the housekeeper that Aunt Betty and Uncle Cecil brought, her name was Bee and her husband's name was Slim. They lived downstairs in the summer at the beach house, and she cooked for Kenny Rogers one night. So, with all that being said, it's been fabulous to be here. Great seeing all these faces. I'm sorry if I didn't recognize some. Back then I had hair like Karen, you know. You know, I don't have much anymore, but at least I'm around to enjoy this, and thank y'all all so much for coming, and have a blessed day.
Thank you. Vicki, do you want to make a couple comments?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of
All right.
things. My
My sister
stories aren't
Vicki.
nearly as exciting as the boys, because I really don't remember as much.
Come right, you're gonna, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I talk loud enough. I'm
Okay.
used to yelling. Y'all went to the club, and you were one of the cool people. Between shows, you would go and sit out on the railing out here, and you'd watch people come in and who was with who. Well, I'd always sit right over there, and I could see, y'all think that I could see who was going in and out with who, and I'd notice who was dating who this weekend. I didn't know their names, but I knew their faces and how they dressed. And I know y'all all know Skeeter Dash. That's his, I mean, he's kind of like Dino Thompson. It's ubiquitous with the beach. Well, Skeeter was a lifeguard at the Thunderbird. I think he was dating one of the Cameron girls. Thank you. So he would let me come swim at the pool if I would save him 2 front row seats at the beach club. Why? He comes sashaying in, you know, on the date, and here's 2 front row seats for you. We were taught never to call anybody by their first name. You were always Mr. and Mrs. If they were more like family, they could be Aunt or like Miss Laura or something like that. Well, when the main bands came in, they always came in and there was a side door to their dressing room. They didn't come through the club. But for some reason, one day, I was there with Mom. Some of the guys, the Tams walked through, and I'm sitting on a stool behind the bar, you know, just hanging out. And people, Joe Pope walked by, and I was like, "Hey, Joe, it's Joe Pope." So I go, "Hey, Joe." Well, my mother snatched me up and took me. There's a room, that office back there. She took me back there and did what I call a circle spank, where she grabs you by the shoulder. Don't you ever! I'm sorry, I just remember meeting so many of these people and how gracious they were to us, and just joke up, "Hey, little Corbett, hey, little Lorraine," you know, that real raspy voice and everything, but had the most twinkly eyes. And Charles did too. And Horace always had kind of a little smirk. And the Four Tops, oh my gosh. They just had a way about them that, to me, they were up here with Jackie Wilson. I love Jackie Wilson too. I've got my very own picture, autographed to Vicki for Jackie Wilson. If our house ever catches on fire, that's the second thing I'm going to do. But anyway, it was wonderful, and not realizing that not everybody's family had a nightclub. Oh, we're going to the club tonight. You're what? What time did you get home? About 2, I think. You what? It just seemed normal to us, and it wasn't too much later that I realized what a privilege it was to learn this music and know this music and be able to win trivia contests. About it. Anyway, thank y'all for coming and listening to us. And I think
Okay, that is a very tough act to follow because I am not used to speaking in public at all. So I'm Karen, I'm Cecil Corbett's daughter, and Daddy was born in New York, and he was, of course, the oldest child. He went to New Hanover High, Oak Ridge Military Academy, and I'm sure there were reasons for that. And Bishopville High School. He ended up in Bishopville, where he met my mom, Betty Ann Kelly, and he ended up staying in Bishopville when he was actually there, you know, working for my grandfather, selling produce, kind of like a produce broker for the whole area, going from little town to little town. But he decided to stay in Bishopville because he could play football there. He could not play football back in Wilmington. He was also a lifeguard at Carolina Beach with Harry Driver, and that's how they made that connection. He served in the Air Force after that in special services, but the only thing we were ever told about his military service was that he was also a lifeguard there. So my mom, Betty Ann Kelly, grew up in Bishopville, where her father was an Esso distributor and dealer for Lee County for over 50 years. And she went to Converse College, and after college, she and my father got married in 1955. They moved to Tabor City, where Daddy was already working for Pop, and they lived there in a garage apartment, and times were tough. Dad traveled a lot for work, Mom paid the bills, and sometimes she couldn't make the ends meet, so she would alternate which month she paid what bill. In 1957, my brother Cliff was born, and then 22 months later, my twin sister Kelly and I were born. So we were all toddlers in a double stroller that Mom was pushing, in the early '60s when Daddy decided he wanted to open up a nightclub. And I'm sure that was because he also needed more money because Pop was tight. So I don't know how he came up with the idea. I unfortunately never asked, never was told. I know they love the beach. I know they loved young people. I know that's been said in the past. But how he got that idea in his head, I just, you know, if you're working in sweet potatoes, how do you come up with opening up a nightclub? I mean, it just is amazing to me. So in 1960, they decided to lease the Shrine Club, and it was the first venue in the area to offer live music. And there was a lot of dancing, but it was all with jukeboxes or whatever. You know, Pavilion, the Pad, different places. They operated in those two different locations from 1961 and 1971, pushing 1972, bringing in nationally known recording artists to little old Myrtle Beach. There's not much that we know about the early years. In the summer of '61, the shows were sporadic, and we don't know how often the shows were there. We only know about a few, mainly because of posters or albums that were recorded there. Bo Diddley was the very first act that came, and he had previously appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, so everybody knew who he was because he had been on the Ed Sullivan Show. If you were here earlier, I had music playing. I don't know if you heard any of his tunes or some of the other acts that were on. I cut it off when we were getting ready to start. But after Bo Diddley was there, he was followed by the Catalinas, Bob Meyer and the Rivieras, Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs, and the Hot Nuts, who we were never. I remember there was an album in our house that we were never allowed to listen to. And then the Isley Brothers, I think, finished that Labor Day weekend. In 1962, Bo Diddley returned, and he recorded his album, which Julian Fowler was nice enough to bring so that you can actually see the album and flip it over and see what his songs were. And this was one of the earliest live remote recordings of that time. In 1963, we don't have any information. There's not a card. We don't know exactly who played. I think it was because my mother was pregnant with my brother, younger brother Alan, and I think that she was not going to be behind a bar before she had him in July the 15th of '63, nor after that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. And then you've got to remember, all during this time, Uncle Charlie and Daddy were working full-time jobs. You know, this was a side gig for them, you know. So in 1964, Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs returned for Easter weekend, and then they were followed, you know, by some other bands. And 1964, like I say, they were working full-time with small children, you know. I mean, I don't know how old y'all were. Chuck, how old were y'all during this time?
I was 6 in '64.
Yeah. So we were living in Tabor City, all on the same street. Next door to each other. They lived on MacArthur Street. And when they would come, Mom and Daddy, and I guess when Mom and Aunt Lorraine especially were alone, they were followed, like I say, that y'all mentioned before, with Eddie Gore or Leon Fomble, and they usually brought the money home. And you know, I don't know whether they counted it at the club or waited until they got back to Tabor City to do all that. But around this time, they decided that they needed a larger venue. You know, the lines were too long. The bands were bringing in bigger crowds than they had thought previously. So Kenneth has mentioned where the Beach Club was, everything that he remembers about the location. I personally remember as a child, my sister and I, either before the show started or after, we would hang out on this little wall, like Vicki mentioned, but we walked it. I mean, it was a concrete block wide, and we would go back and forth waiting on somebody. And it was a low wall, you know, and half of those blocks were, like you see them here, that they've been misplaced. But excuse me. Phone I didn't mean that to happen. I thought I had it on silence. But anyway, in 1965 is when the cannery burned, and that's when I think there was a big pivotal change, you know, because they had to move out of the area. They weren't in Tabor City anymore. Daddy was working in Peaches. I remember one summer where we had in our beach house a garage full of peach crates, wall-to-wall peach crates, two-car garage, where he had brought peaches home and was trying to sell them in the local area. So he was doing that, and I'd like to go ahead and at this time and just mention a couple of the acts that were playing back then. And in 1965, the Zodiacs recorded their album, or partially recorded it, at the Beach Club. Chester Mayfield, Hysterics, and the Bushmen, I don't even know who they are. You may have to fill us in on who they were. I've never heard those names. In 1966, the Four Tops opened, and some of their songs, of course, you know, we still sing today. We love all their songs. Martha and the Vandellas, Tams, the Epics, Fabulous Five, Hot Nuts Again, Zodiacs Again, Tams Again, Hot Nuts Again, Zodiacs, Tams, and the Hot Nuts. And they closed with Four Tops, Zodiacs, and Tams that year. And that was 1966. And I think my mother had had enough. She was tired of going back and forth, and we bought a beach house at the end of August. So from 1967, 1967, and I'm going to get Kenneth to name some of the bands that were there at that point. It was a game changer for us. As kids, we lived at the beach from Memorial Weekend all the way to Labor Day. And that was really big to do.
Yeah.
We were on the beach every day. My mom would come in at night, late at night, and get up the next day, put us on the beach, lay in a lounge chair, and sleep most of the day. And she would wake up from naps, and this meant you're out too far, come in. This meant I want to see how deep you are. And if you got the look and she did this, you were in big time trouble. It was a big look. And so for us, we were allowed to go 5 houses down to the left, 5 houses down to the right. Both of them had long boardwalks as we did too, going all the way to the beach. And they had little houses on them. So when you were in the water, it was easy to see and navigate where you had to stay, what your parameters were. And I remember that like it was night and day. I mean, that is one of my fondest memories. And then, of course, at night, if we were lucky, we got to go to the club. And so, like I say, she slept on the beach. The lifeguards were part of our story. We would leave our house. We lived at 9th Avenue South, Ocean Drive. We would go out on the beach and hand out cards. Go up all the way to the Ocean Drive Pier, come back to the house, take a break, go all the way to the Crescent Beach, Atlantic Beach Pier, and we couldn't go any further than that, weren't allowed from that, because there was a chain link fence separating the beaches. And I don't know if y'all remember that. And so then we would walk back. But we were put to work at a very early age. I'm very shy. I was even shyer back then. And so for me, what I would do is, it was easy if you were passing somebody to hand them a card. You know, they'd say, what is this? And we'd say, oh, it's my dad's glove. You know, y'all need to go, whatever. But my thing that I like to do was go up to all the girls sleeping on their blankets. Because back then, there weren't as many beach chairs. Most people had a blanket that they put out. And so I would always sneak my cards underneath the suntan lotion. And I would not even tell them that I was there and putting them there. So it was a lot of fun. Cliff helped put out all the posters. He also would go, this was my older brother, would go up and down the streets in Main Street, Ocean Drive, Main Street, Crescent Beach, and help put out posters. But we really had a great time. We had no air conditioning in the beach house, but because it was ocean front, we had open windows. We had an attic fan, if y'all know what that is. And that's where we lived, you know, the whole summer long. And so we had several rooms underneath that Go Boy and several other people lived I stayed in. It was 2 bedrooms separated by a bathroom. I don't know what they did for a kitchen. I don't know what they did for a living area. I don't know, were they lifeguards?
No.
What did they do during the day?
Hustle.
Oh, hustle.
Hustle.
I remember them hardly ever being there except to sleep. Okay, all right, well, there you go. So anyway, I just remember that there were different guys that would stay there. Now, I'm only telling y'all this because later on, that was my dad's first office. They closed in the downstairs, they added a living room, they added, a couple more bedrooms that were also offices, added more bathrooms, and added a kitchen. So that was Daddy's first office, and it actually felt like you were almost halfway underground because the sand dunes came up in front of it, so you really couldn't see out to see the ocean. We also had another room that was down there. That's where our caregiver B, who would stay there. I don't remember Slim staying there that much. I think she was there most of the times. He would come in on the weekends, and I'm not real sure what he did, but there was one bathroom for her and one bedroom that was so small you could barely put a double bed and a dresser in it and walk in between. The bed was here and the dresser was here. And she cooked for us. She took care of us. She didn't haul us anywhere because she didn't drive. I remember, Mama taking her down to Atlantic Beach when she had time off or whatever, spend time with her friends. But you've got to remember, this was a very segregated community. I mean, it's a shame, but it happened, and it's part of our history. The shame of it was that you had all these huge groups like the Four Tops or the Platters who couldn't stay anywhere but Atlantic Beach. And the only place they could eat was Atlantic Beach. Now, there were times that B actually took food to some of the bands. And as y'all mentioned before, she cooked for Kenny Rogers, but she cooked for Kenny Rogers at our beach house. And she had dinner at our they had dinner at our beach house. And we had a large enough table, large enough space that Mama had actually, and I'm just now remembering this, she had actually stripped down that she had found in a salvage place and put a big piece of plywood on the top of it and made it large enough for her to have large gatherings for our family and for guests. But anyway, so that's just some of the things I wanted to say. Now, I do want to share some memories. Unfortunately, my older brother, Cliff, has already passed away, so he can't share memories. My twin sister, Kelly, can't be here today because her son is having a tooth extracted. He's having oral surgery today. And then my younger brother, I don't know if y'all know this, but he is actually a promoter for AEG, which is, he's followed in Daddy's footsteps, and he is pretty big time right now. I mean, he's been on tour with Paul McCartney for doing a lot of work with them for the last 2 years. So I'm very, very proud of him. He was a baby when all this was going on. Actually, he was born in, I think, 63 maybe. And when we would go to the club, he was on Bee's lap. And for that, when she went to the club with us, she was tickled because after that show, the Four Tops all kissed her on her cheek, and she swore she would never wash it. Another story that I have of the Four Tops is we love to go crabbing. We crab on the very end of Cherry Grove, on their little points. We didn't like to eat crabs. We didn't like to pick them. We didn't like to eat them, or whatever. So we would usually release them and let them go. So it was a fun thing for us. But when the Four Tops were there, we decided we were going to bring the Four Tops crabs. And when we got there, to their little place they were staying at, the crab basket fell over. And crabs went everywhere. Not just 4. I mean, we had a lot of crabs. They went everywhere. You've never seen 4, 5, 6 men jump into chairs. I mean, they were everywhere and they were jumping. And as children, we just thought that was hilarious. So that's just a few of my memories. Like I say, the biggest one is probably passing out the handy cards, the Four Tops with crabs. I know that I wanted to share a couple of things from my sister. She had some favorites. I have mixed up my notes so much, I don't even know where I am anymore. But she actually remembers going to see Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs at the Shrine Club. And I mean, she's got a great memory. She remembers being driven back and forth, with Igor, Leon Fomble, whoever would take us home. We would usually leave after, if there was a first act, we would leave after that if we were there. I remember she and I both do a couple of times actually sleeping on the floor. There was actually a small room right here. It's not on this. And that's it's between the office and it's right here by the door, right in here, and that's where they kept like right there, and these two connected. They were back to back. You walk in, and that's where they kept all the extra cups, all the extra tickets, and like I say, I remember all of those tickets being torn as you came in. And do y'all remember you got stamped with black light?
Oh, yeah.
And so for all the people who talk about, I snuck in, I got in, I came through the back door, whatever, you would have had a hard time sneaking in. There was always 3 or 4 people sitting right here on the side coming in the door, taking your ticket when you're buying it, all that. The side doors on the side, unless my cousins let them in the side, or Leon Fomble or somebody, I don't know how you could have come in the side doors. And then they talk about coming in a back door. If you're ever on Facebook, they'll talk about coming in the back door. Y'all, there wasn't a back door. There was dressing rooms back there. There was no back door. So those are just a few of my memories, and I'm sure that I've missed a lot on my page of to-dos here. I do remember as a child listening to WTGR, Tiger Radio.
Oh, yeah.
That was a major advertising source for my dad in Furniture. Was there another radio station at the time? I'll have to ask Bill Hennessy. Was there?
It was MYB, which was basically an adult-oriented, middle-of-the-road station. The other main competitor on the beach was WAPE out of Jacksonville, Florida, which was 690, and they put a signal up here like nobody's business. In 1965, TGR came on the air with another Taborite backing it, and that was John Souls, who owned WTAB, along with Izzy Kramer, who had Kramer's Men's Store in Whiteville. They put the station on the air, only had 250 watts, a little stronger than a light bulb, but it did reach from Cherry Grove down to Murrells Inlet. And that whole deal at TGR and Tiger Radio, yes, what your dad told you about the station and about using TGR, that placed him in a position that he could interact with them and take those acts down and have them interviewed on the air. In January of 1966, I was fired at TGR for playing spots for free for the Beach Club. I only paid one time.
Well, at this time, I think either Kenneth can come in and give me some of the music that was played. I don't know, where did I leave off? Did I tell who played in 66 or 67? Or y'all can just look at the schedules and see who played. But I would like Julian Fowler, if he would come up and kind of tell y'all a little bit about how the booking agency aspect and how all these little bands traveled around. So if he can do that, I think that might be a good thing at this point, because we are probably going to run out of time.
I grew up in little Bennettsville, South Carolina, and I cut my teeth on a place called the Coachman and Four in Bennettsville. The truth of the matter is I was in a little combo, and I wasn't doing my homework. And my parents had said to me, Julian, if you don't study, you're going to get out of the little band. Little did I know, they already knew I'd be getting out of the band. They'd already coerced the teacher, but Latin. And so my mother picked me up for school that day and handed me an envelope with $23.18 in it. And I went to where the band practiced, and I left the envelope. I had a key to get in. I left my key in the envelope and the $23.18, and took my microphone and tambourine and left. And that was my ending of the band business. They wanted me to study. They didn't like the crowd I was hanging with. I like them fine. One of them two of them preachers now. But anyway, in 1965, fresh with a driver's license, my father ran a wholesale grocery business in Bennettsville, and we had a place called the Coachman and Four where Wilson Howard would call the order in, and he was a student at UNC Pembroke, and he was in summer school, and so he would call my dad, and he would call the order in. He'd get cigarettes and chewing gum and book matches and those beer cups, and I would take them after hours. The wholesale closed at 4 o'clock because we opened at 5 in the morning, and I would take them out to the Coachman and meet Wilson out there. Well, sometime Wilson was late, and I would meet and talk with the bands and collect those little 45 records, of which I've got about 35,000 now at home in Florida. And I still have those same 18 that I acquired during that time. But anyway, from Wilson Howard, I came to know the Beach Club, and I came to know Cecil Corbett, and I came to know Bunky Odom. And what you don't really realize is Cecil Corbett took his job with the Beach Club to heart. He trained and learned with Wilson Howard. He trained and learned with Bunky Odom. So if you look at those schedules there, in 1965 and 1966, while your mother was raising you all, he hit the road with Ken Atkins, and he hit the road with Bunky Odom and went to work for Joker's 3. That's why you see on these schedules, all bands booked by Joker's 3. But it's got Cecil's phone number. He wanted the people to call him so he could make that commission. And he was on top of things. So in 66 and 67, he's got Joker's 3. Well, by the end of 67, Joker's 3 booking agency out of Greensboro, where Bunky and Cecil were part-time employees, they began to merge with other people. And so Bunky went out on his own in the summer of 1967 above the drugstore in Burlington and formed Norca Talent. And that's why you see on the card that says all bands booked by Joker's 3 and Norca. Well, by that time, Cecil had 3 years worth of booking under his belt. He had 3 years of booking bands, traveling with bands, finding out who the better bands were, who the better clubs were, who they liked, who brought in the biggest amount of revenue. And so Bunky, he ended up leaving Norca Talent and traveling to Atlanta with the Arnold Agency. And from there, he went to work for Phil Walton. And we all know, a lot of you know, he ended up managing for Phil Walton and the Associates, the Allman Brothers band. I talk to Bunky quite often. I talk to Wilson quite often. Wilson has made the move. Wilson is the East Coast Vice President for Live Nation. He started in the little town of McCall, South Carolina. And Gene Crow's father said that Wilson Howard was the most honest young man in McCall he'd ever met in his life. And to this day, I really think that's what happened. Anyway, at the end of 1969, Wilson left the Coachman and came to the Beach Club. And from there, the booking agencies kind of took off because they weren't doing regional bands anymore, or as much. In 1966, the main acts that were being booked at the Beach Club were the Inman Limited out of Burlington, Willie T and the Magnificents out of Burlington. The story is that that's not the real Willie T, but the Willie T, Cecil Corbett told everybody it was just like him. And he gave you that name. So the Magnificents became Willie T and the Magnificents. The Attractions, the Monzas, and Bob Collins and the Fabulous Five. Now, these were Carolina horn bands. These were Carolina horn bands. You see all these posters up here? All these people need horn players. Well, if you sat in a high school band room like my grandson does and learn how to read charts and play and read charts again and play and practice, those are the kind of people Cecil Corbett wanted backing up and participating with their bands. So there are a couple members of this band called the Footnotes that are here today that I hope will get a chance to say something. They were one of those Sumter, South Carolina bands that became an exclusive agent with the Beach Club, an exclusive band with the Beach Club. Anyway, as the music began to change, if any of you have seen Greg Haynes' book, The Hey Baby Days of Beach Music, he depicts from the 60s to 1969, when General Johnson couldn't sing another song and sang Hey Baby by Bruce Chanel sped up. That's what Greg called the Hey Baby Days of Beach Music. During that, the bands began to change, the bands got longer. Cecil said, I don't need the club business, I don't need to work that hard. The Corbett said, let's just go into the booking agency. So what you notice is Beach Club Incorporated or Beach Club Booking got started. And to my knowledge, other than the day when I saw this BCI flyer, this is the only Beach Club booking agent that I had ever seen until today. And this was put together in the fall of 1970. Well, in 1971, I was one of those guys with the flashlight. Water Dog had, I think, 5 South Carolina football players working. And they had to go back to second session summer school. So I was working at the Boy Scout camp at Camp Coker, and I said, I'm going to take the rest of the summer off if it's okay. And they said, fine. We didn't have many scouts that year. So Wilson said, Junior, what I want you to do is work the parking lot. I said, work the parking lot? What's going on out there? They said, you need to make sure you get the people right in the rows and make sure you can help them get out at night. I didn't really think much about that, but I did. I did that. And one of Cecil's pet peeves is when they had those little trailers back there for the extra dressing rooms. Cecil said to Bill Stubbs and I, we worked here that summer, he said, what we want you to do is early in the morning we want you to get here. And we want you to pick the whole parking lot up because we don't want all these people in Myrtle Beach to think all we do here is party and drink beer. So it was a pet peeve. Cecil wanted us out there picking up the parking lot, and we did that. And I had one wonderful summer, the summer of 1971, for 5 weeks. When I got back to college, about 3 weeks into September, the phone rang. It was Cecil. He said, Julian, I got a problem. I got 4 bands. I got 4 exclusive acts. I need you to find me somewhere for them to play. Well, I put together a little network of about 16 places, and I would call. So here I am in a dorm at little Gardner-Webb College, sitting there in my underwear with a clipboard and a bunch of phone numbers, calling people at 11 o'clock on Wednesday night. Look, we got the Georgia Prophets that are open. He'll take $300. You keep the rest of the money, or split the door with them. Would you do it? Would you do it? And I did that for all of 71 and part of 72. And I had a very, very nice working relationship with the Corbetts and the Corbett family. But what I want to say to you Corbetts, and I'm sincere in saying this, what happened? What would have happened had they not had the Beach Club, and they not had the Cellar, and they not had the other Iron Raleigh, and we not had Williams Lake? We wouldn't have had all this music. So this whole audience needs to stand up and applaud you. We're forever grateful.
Stand up. Sit down.
I've just touched on the booking business a little bit. I think at this time I'm going to recognize Charles Stafford and Hugh Hodge which were 2 members of the band. And Hugh, tell the story on how you got hired by the Beach Club.
Yeah, we come up.
Yeah.
We can almost walk under.
Yeah.
Here we go.
We were vertically challenged.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hugh is the lead singer. Hugh was the lead singer of the Footnotes in Sumter, South Carolina, a little band that was started by Tommy James, who was at Clemson in the Footnotes. And when Tommy came to teach school at Edmonds High School, he allowed these group of fellows to use the name the Footnotes. And they've always been one of my favorite bands because they play I'm Gonna Miss You by the Artists.
That's one of Cecil's most favorite songs. He has to play it a lot. But a little interesting story. We were a band, very young band. We just graduated high school, and this is the first experience we had with Beach Club in Cecil. And we're standing around, and the gentleman that booked our band back then was our bass player. He comes over and says, somebody from the Beach Club, and I think it was Cecil or Wilson, one of the other, but somebody had called and said they needed a band to back up Jackie Wilson that night. And they wanted to know if we wanted to play, because we did have a big horn band. So you heard all the accolades about Jackie Wilson, and you think we're 18 years old, we got to go down and back this guy up.
Yeah.
We'd never played with him before, nothing. So sure enough, he finally Randy, he finally convinced us that we really were going to go to the Beach Club. And Jackie Wilson's going to be there, and like back then that was like Michael Jackson to us. So what happened was there was another band that was supposed to back him up, and he was going to be there a week. And another band, one of his exclusive bands, was going to back him up. But somebody in the band got sick, and they couldn't play the job, so he called us. So we show up and we play, and everything went great. We had a good time. And he, I think he had brought a keyboard player and a drummer, so we mainly had the horn section, and then we did backup singing, that kind of stuff. But we got through the show. We did a show, and Jackie would do a show. And on my part, when I was 18 and I just saw Jackie Wilson perform, and I got to go on the stage behind him, and I'm a singer too. And I'm like, this is a good deal. So anyway, but you live and you learn. But he was a great guy. Jackie was a nice guy, and he for some reason he took to our band. And so anyway, make a long story, we're packing up, and we're getting, we could pack up in 15 minutes back then. It wasn't a big deal. But so the road manager, I think his name was Sims, he came out and said, "What are y'all doing?" And I said, "We're leaving. We're only playing one night, and another band is coming tomorrow and for the rest of the week." So he went back and mentioned that to Jackie, and Jackie had a fit. He started screaming and throwing, and he said, "Get Cecil up here right now." Oh, that band. He says, "That band leaves, I'm leaving with him." So I don't know if y'all know Cecil, but he would have a cigarette. He'd roll in his mouth. He'd get nervous. That cigarette was going
Wilson,
right in
we're going to make the door now. Look. Anybody knew my Uncle Cecil, he was pacing with the cigarette in his mouth, rolling it, flicking it, and he wouldn't even lick.
So he asked us, he just got through the first show. Y'all think y'all can play here for the rest of the week? Really like, we're going like, I've got a lot of laying out by the pool to do, Yeah, we did. So we ended up playing that week with him, and that kind of opened the door for us to start playing more. He did more jobs. He played more shows with Jackie, and then Cecil was always great to us. We became one of his exclusive bands. And we probably played with him for another 3 years. So we broke up.
Through 71.
Yeah, through 71. But he was just he gave a bunch of kids. We were young kids. He gave us a chance to play with the kind of acts that we were playing. We played with Billy Stewart and Charlie actually played the Apollo Theater. We'll talk about that. But we played a lot of his acts, and we did at the Beach Club and Coachman 4. But that was the kind of experience I had with Cecil. But when you can think about, we were talking on the way, but how many opportunities we had to do things and play and meet people and all over the country. We were in the Southeast, and that was because Cecil gave us a chance. He did like kids. He liked young people. He was a good guy and always treated us well. And it was a great place to work with. Him. And I remember y'all running around with you. I want to re-emphasize that Cecil. everything's been said about the Corbett family, what they did for music and us. We'd like to accentuate that in terms of being bands that worked for them. They were always good to us. They were always honest with us. Didn't make a whole lot of money off of percentage-wise, I guess, and they booked us. I've got a whole, for some reason, I kept all these contracts that go back to 1969 and 70. I've got places I started looking at that I've forgotten. We played all over the South. It used to be from Auburn to Alabama to Virginia to UNC to Agnes Scott and the clubs. But they were always honest and upfront with us. It gave us that opportunity, like Hugh said. We had, I don't know how much time we got, but a couple of stories. We played with Jackie Wilson a lot. I guess there were two guys, Jackie Wilson and Billy Stewart, that we thought, top of the crop, cream of the crop, top of the pop. But we worked with Archie Bell and, you go through the whole list of the Drifters and Arthur Connolly and who else we can name? Everybody, Will Anthony Imperial. And they had that privilege of working with these legends, But I had the opportunity to go on the road with Billy Stewart and play guitar with him. And that came about by, if y'all remember, Billy Stewart was killed in 1970 in an automobile accident. Well, in 1968, he was coming from North Carolina, coming down to the Beach Club, and we were playing at the club, and we were finishing up on a Sunday, and Billy and his band were coming in to play the next week. And Cecil got a call that afternoon saying, golly, they just had an accident, a couple of guys have been killed, all the equipment's been destroyed. Billy doesn't have a band, he was traveling separately, he's okay. Can you guys stay and play? And back up Billy Stewart, we're like, yeah. Sure, thank you. We made good arrangements. Yeah. And we already did 4 or 5 of his songs, so Cecil knew that. And we had a 4-piece horn section that that's one reason he liked to book us. And so Billy comes down, he's obviously shaken up because his band has just been basically destroyed. And he walks in, and we've got 18, 22-year-old white kids. I see when he comes in, look, he said, these guys can't possibly know our music. So he came in and started rehearsing. He'd go through a song, and he'd shake his head, and after we went through 3 or 4 songs, he said, I think this is going to work. So we played that the rest of that week, and as Julian said, Cecil would bounce off other dates off the Beach Club, whether it's the Coachman, the upstairs in Spartanburg, or the Cat's Eye, or the other eye in Raleigh. And so then when Billy played 4 or 5 more dates, we backed him up, and then the band couldn't play, and then I was able to be his musical director for 3 or 4 dates. And the manager came to me and said, we're putting together a new band, would you like to go on the road with him? I said, what time do you want me to be there? And so I basically did it. As soon as I said, I got to finish school. And the next couple of weeks, I took it up to D.C. anyway. And I could go on about that. But we had a great time with Stewart and all these acts. And we had that opportunity because of the Corbetts. And we met some great people, played a lot of these bands. I mean, we got to know all these guys very well. And you sort of had a camaraderie. We would play these shows in Athens or Georgia Tech, and all the Cecil's bands would be there. We got to be real good friends with the Georgia Prophets. And both of us actually had the opportunity to play with the Georgia Prophets. I played with the Prophets. When I got back off the road with Billy Stewart, Billy Scott ran into me at a dance with who is now my bride, at her college dance in 1969. So we old. And he said, Charlie, you go back off the road. I need a guitar player. I said, do you? So I filled in until Roy Smith came in, and I played with Prophets about 5 months. But then later, Hugh actually was in a band called Caution, and you played with the Prophets. Cecil booked y'all for how many years? Several years.
Several years.
It's all but through all this, the Corbetts were spreading music throughout the Southeast and helping bands out, and we could make more in one night, and most of our friends were making 2 weeks. It wasn't much, but to us it was a whole lot. But anything else you want?
No, it was an experience.
And we met
met Julian, we would play at the Coachman at 4. I remember we played the Coachman, played with Del Phonics, we played with Jerry Butler. I don't know how many acts, but that's how we got to know this young man, and music historian and a good friend, and appreciate everything you've done to keep the music going too. And I know there's some other celebs out
Wilson
here.
was he was a great guy. Bill Wilson was a great guy to work with too.
Yeah, and absolutely, Wilson, Howard, did a lot for us. So anyway, we appreciate them making a few comments, and we appreciate y'all having us.
Well, thank you guys. That's something that we really didn't recognize at the time, is how important it was for these major acts who didn't travel with an orchestra to be able to come in and do their thing and have young professional musicians back them up. And that was great to share all that with us. Thank you. Now, another quick minute or two, we'd like Bill Hennessy, he wants to make a couple of comments. Again, if you think about it, advertising was a very difficult industry because it was so localized, but through the likes of people like Bill and his company and partners in radio business, it really helped make all this work. So let's take a couple of minutes and share a story or two for us. Thank you, Bill.
Go through there to the left.
I'm not going to leave because Bill, I got to do the rest of it.
It's everything I do. Anyway, I got in the radio business in Marion, South Carolina, fortunately, in a period of time. We had a guy come from Hartford, Connecticut, who had been a promoter in the club business. And he owned the station, but I had the opportunity to do a lot of things. Well, one night I come to Myrtle Beach, to the beach club when it was at the Shrine Club. And the two guys that were there were Eddie Gouler and Leon Fondle, the two Tabor City guys. And the show's over. I start to walk out the door. And this guy grabs me by the shoulder. And he turns me around and he goes, "Did you pay to get in here?" Sounds like a story, but it is. And what happened was, the guy turns me around, I'm looking at this guy, it's about this much bigger than me, rolling that cigarette. And he says, "Did you pay to get in? I ask you a question." And I go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Cecil Corbett." I said, "Yeah, I paid to get in. I paid Eddie at the door." "Oh, well, you don't have to pay to get in." So I said, "Well, why is that, Cecil?" And he says, "Because you do that show on top of that drive-in restaurant in Marion and Darien, and you're always talking about the people who are going to appear here at the Beach Club." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, and that's why you don't ever have to pay, and bring your friends. Because I love what you're doing." And I said, "I've seen you sitting beneath the booth there, smoking your cigarette and, enjoying yourself on Sunday afternoons." So that's how I got to know Cecil. But I didn't realize it at the time that he would become the largest independent promoter in the entire South. And I mean every major coliseum, he knew those people. I also knew the other side of Cecil Corbett, a man who was very compassionate about the people who worked with him. If you helped Cecil, Cecil helped you. Charlie was more of behind the scenes. The upfront man was Cecil Corbett. But it's the summer of 1966, and Cecil says, "Charlie and I got to go work in Pauline, South Carolina. We got to pick some peaches. Yeah. I want you and John Singley to come up, and we're going to go out and eat." Okay, so we left here early. We got up there probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I saw Cecil Corbett work, and Charlie, and of course their dad was there. The amazing thing was, it's now 4 o'clock. The Dixie Crystal truck comes in, and they're putting the syrup on the peaches, and they're rolling them through, and they're canning it like crazy. It's 5:30. Cecil says, "Let's go eat." He gets off the tractor, calls for Charlie. and your granddad shows up, and you know what he says? Both of you boys get back on these tractors. We got a crop to get in. The deal is, we're going to get that crop in just like you have to get that crop in this summer at that beach club. So we didn't eat till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
But this was the type of family they were. They were together. They did things greatly. But I was proud of the fact of all the things that Cecil did. This may go outside the parameters a little bit. Cecil brought major talent to Myrtle Beach. He brought it to Myrtle Beach. The #1 club that everybody was headed for was the Beach Club. One of the things that was an advantage, which the state and the federal government changed in 1983, was the beer. You only had to be 18. Let's go to the beach. And a lot of the people who originally came did come from a radius from around here, but then other people learned that the beach club was having all this entertainment. These are called Globe ticket posters. The Globe Printing Company printed those rainbow deals. And what's wonderful about all this was how exciting the time was, and Cecil and Charlie allowed me to be a part of it. But I worked at WTGR, and yeah, we played a lot of commercials. At the time, you may think, well, how much competition did they have? They had the Black Cat in North Myrtle Beach. They had the Cavalier Club in North Myrtle Beach. You had the original Spanish Galleon in North Myrtle Beach. But there was no concentration of clubs in Myrtle Beach. They had a major advantage. Cecil and Charlie saw a future of entertainment, but on a much wider and broader scale than what most people would ever attain. They had a long run. It was a great run. But Cecil knew the business, and he learned it through his own efforts and with the help of a lot of people with flashlights. Oh my God! Flashlights. The other deal when you got in that club free was this one thing. You got a flashlight. You got there early and you parked the cars behind the beach club. I mean, it's just amazing what you learn when you're in an environment, when you have somebody who's looking to the future and he's willing to drag you along, whether you're Wilson Howard or anybody else in the business. I like to think about the summer of 1966 because that was one year. That was the greatest year of my life because of the beach club and several other promoters in town. But we had a vicious thing going on around the world. It's called Vietnam. And somebody was going to serve in the service. And it took me away on October the 6th of 1966. I missed 4 years of the beach club. But I will tell you one more story. Clifford Curry.
Oh, God.
Who knew Clifford before Easter weekend, 1967? Who was Clifford Curry? Does anybody know? He was a curb hop in Knoxville, Tennessee is what he was. But it just so coincided with the fact that I was in the Coast Guard, but I was going to fly back home on Easter weekend with the money that I had made when I was just out here being a DJ. I fly into Charlotte. My dad picks me up, takes me to Marion. I get a vehicle. Now it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm headed down here, and I'm listening to TGR. God, good to be home. The amazing thing was, they said, this guy named Clifford Corbett, Clifford Curry, was going to be at the beach club that night. I saw Clifford. She shot a hole in my soul. And I hit ourselves in the morning. And it was a great act. And I loved it. I picked up a girl in North Myrtle Beach. She went with me to the beach club. I had to take her back. And I said, he's going to be a hit. He'll be a hit. I remember going back to Marion. I stopped over there at the PD River. It's now 3 o'clock in the morning. I waded out into the little PD River. Got back in the car. Get to my house. My dad takes me back to Charlotte to fly back. But I was here when Clifford made it. What I'm talking about here is no matter who you are and what you are, there are a million memories out there. And they're all so clear, and they're all so wonderful, and they're just perfect in your head the way that you live them. Thank you, Cecil. Thank you, Charlie. At the beach club, no matter who you were, was if you were a lady, to hear a man say, "Do you want to dance?"
Thank you, Bill. As we shared, the DJ business was very, very important to us, and I'd like to give Deacon to make just a couple of quick comments.
Oh, well. Let me do that.
I appreciate everybody's patience, and this is exciting, and we just give you a minute or two to give us
I just want to say, look, when I came to Myrtle Beach, I have to say, these guys, I met all the boys out on the boulevard who had out searching for women. We had a great time, but I always heard of Cecil Corbett. I kept thinking, who's this Cecil guy? So he owns this thing called the Beach Club. I said, you got something off of Boulevard? You got 17? Man, that was ritzy to go off 17. You got 17 to the Beach Club. So I said, this big old garage looking place. And it had the Tams and all these groups playing there. I said, man, I gotta go check it out. So I went and I checked it out. I got to see, well, as a matter of fact, I got to see Billy Stewart. And as a matter of fact, that night, somebody threw something at him on the stage. I think it was a Ouija. I said, this is pretty cool. It's almost like West Virginia. I even got it close enough. Cecil let me get up close enough one time to see Fats Domino. I got to count all the rings on his fingers. That was a big deal. But let me tell you about when I first got here. When I met these guys, all the Corbett boys, I knew that I had been to the beach club once or twice, and they kept saying, man, you know, they'd go around, they'd pass stuff out on the beaches. I said, man, what a great job. I said, I'd like to do that. So I kind of worshiped. I looked at, here's the way I look at Cecil. He was one of these guys, typical, yeah. And he always had that. All the time. He's always busy. But anyway, I met him at your granddaddy's employment office. Right next to a, what was it, a...
Laundromat.
Yeah, well, it looked like it was a laundromat at one time.
Yeah.
They had a laundromat down there, and a guy said, dig it. He looked for a little part-time job. Why don't you go down there and check it out? So I go down there, and there's this guy sitting at a desk, and when I walk in, I didn't know who he was. And so here comes Cecil and Charlie in the door. I thought, well, these guys, they're not looking for jobs, are they? And the old guy sitting there, getting ready to talk to me. Cecil comes in, he does that number, he has a cigarette. He said, what you need? I said, I'm looking around for a job. He said, I'll tell you what, do you like women? I love women. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I've got a stack of these little tickets here. He said, I'll pay you if you want to go down that beach and walk around and pass out these tickets. And pass it out to good-looking people. If you're talking to an ugly guy, pass out to good-looking people. So I took a couple tickets, stuck in my pocket. I thought, man, I'm going to use these for bait. So he said, make sure the lifeguards get them. So I'd give a couple of them to the lifeguards here and there. So you get them, draw them into the club. Of course, if you had the girls in there, the guys are going to show up. You know that. So anyway, he says, yeah, you got to meet some pretty beach girls down here. I said, man, we got pretty girls up in West Virginia. He said, yeah. I said, yeah, man, they're real pretty. That's their ridge runners. We just can't catch them. I said, down here, I've learned if I walk down that beach, man, I can catch these beach girls because they get all bogged down in that sand. I'll catch one of them. But Cecil's such a great guy, man. He was P.T. Barnum. He's P.T. Barnum to me. I have to say his brother, man, Charlie's the nicest dude in the world. He'd have to be the John Ringling. He's pretty much more the business kind of guy, whereas Cecil's a Mr. Hyper. But they really, they to me it's like, it's so cool. They were in entertainment. And I thought, man, this is great. And that's pretty much kind of geared me towards entertainment. I loved radio. And so I finally got into radio down here in Myrtle Beach for the first time. That was back in, 77. Thanks to Bill Hennessy. And but I got one thing I will say about Cecil. He called me one time. He said, Deacon, I'm on the air. It's about past somewhere like 9:30.
He said, look, man, I got a big announcement to make. I said, really? He said, yeah. He says, we got a major group coming to town. I said, you kidding? He said, no, man, I'm talking major. I said, who is it? He said, I can't tell you. I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, well, what I want to do, he says, I want to get on, just before you get off at 10 o'clock, he said, I'll be at the convention center. He said, at the ticket box. He says, but I'm going to let you announce this group. I said, well, who is it? He says, I'll call you in 10 minutes. So I said, well, I've got to have enough time to tease this thing. So I get Bob Chase. You remember Bob Chase? I said, record this. So Cecil calls me 10 minutes later. He says, Deacon, he said, we're going to bring in Peter Tosh. And I said, what? He's in the Rolling Stones. What? You know, I was like shaking. I said, Stones? I said, can I get tickets? He said, yeah. He said, I'll save you some tickets. I said, no, I'll be over there in a few minutes. He said, no. He said, this thing's got to be blasted at 10 o'clock when you get off the air. I want this thing right on the air. I want the people to come in here and buy these tickets. I said, we got you covered. So we did. So I took off. He had it recorded. Bob recorded it. At 10 o'clock, I was gone. I was over there at the time I was supposed to get off the air. So I'm standing at the ticket booth. Nobody there but me. I'm looking around. I see this Volkswagen coming down the road, right? And he stops. He jumps out and takes off running to the ticket box. And his Volkswagen keeps going. I'm going, well, it's 10 o'clock. And so anyway, that's how Cecil, I said, why did you want me to do it? He said, Deacon, I'm going to tell you something, man. I've known you a long time. He said, I know you got quite a listening audience. He said, WKCQ is big. He said, I had to announce it over WKCQ, and I had to let you do it. So to me, that was one of the biggest, had to be one of the biggest deals in my whole life for Cecil, P.T. Barnum, to ask me to do something like that. I love your daddy. Great guy.
Sold out in about an hour.
Oh, yeah, sold out in a skinny
10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, and I got myself and Greg Feller about 15 tickets apiece. Cecil was nice to me. And I scalped a couple, I made a couple of bucks. That's the name of the game. That's the name of the game. But anyway, that's it. I'm going to tell you, I love the Corbett family, all you guys and gals. I've respected you all my life ever since I've been here. It's like, I came to Myrtle Beach in 1968 on the boulevard. It was, I didn't know there was anything beyond the boulevard. Now it's way beyond the boulevard. But anyway, I want to thank you all for inviting me here. I feel like a member of your family, and I will be over Christmas, but you know what?
I would like to say something, a couple things about my Uncle Cecil. I got along with him a whole lot better than my dad. We didn't see eye to eye. And he kind of took me under his wing and showed me how to do a lot of things. And, right around when I was 18, I was pretty much running wild in the streets and thinking I was invincible. And he calls me over and he says, Chuck, come here. And he said, I hear you're having a real good time. He looked at me and said, look at me. He said, I hear you're having a real good time. He said, if I can give you any one piece of advice, he said, you can get away with a whole lot more if you keep a low profile. I took that to heart and went underground. I started studying real hard and trying to do a lot better. But he was really such a mentor to me in the way he thought, and he was hyper, very, very hyper, and everybody that knew him, he never stood still. And I never saw a man that could pick up a piece of paper with 3 rows of numbers and look at it for 15 seconds and tell you within $100 what all those numbers added up to. His brain was just amazing about how he processed things. And it really gave me an insight into being a businessman, into doing the things that I did in life. And I really praised him and thought a lot of him. And of course, my dad too. I loved them both. But they were such great mentors to me and really great leaders. And I really am proud to be their sons and nephews.
Are there any lifeguards here? she's going to bring the microphone. Just give us a quick, story about something that touches your heart about the Beach Club.
Well, the concert that was mentioned earlier in 1966 with Martha and the Vandellas, I had some fake ID and I was there. And that man sitting over there, Mr. Joe McVeigh, gave me the 4 best summers of my life when I worked with Little Kenna at the Putt Putt, but I was down on the beach. And now I've lived here 14 years full time. My daddy's buried out in North Myrtle Beach Memorial Gardens. So thank y'all for having me.
Any other lifeguards want to make a comment? Great.
That's one thing. I had the privilege of Bobby Hubbard being my roommate, and God, that he enjoyed Cecil letting him get on stage and introduce. And I had to carry those flashlights so I could get in free. And you can bet I passed out those little yellow cards many, many days. But I appreciate the Corbett family. They were very nice to us, full lifeguards. Thanks.
Any workers, were there any people that, well, everybody worked for him at one point, it seemed like, but would anyone else like to make a quick comment as a worker at the Beach Club? All right, now we're going to open it up a little bit to generally anyone that wants to speak, and just to give a short little memento of something, and then that should wrap it up. So we'll short.
Real quick, you see these posters? I put all of them up. First year, Cecil had a convertible, and I liked driving a convertible. And so the deal was, I got $1 an hour, put them up on every pole in North Myrtle Beach, and I bring my brother with me. We had 3 steps, and we put them on. If you'll notice, a lot of those are 3 days. So he didn't just bring them in, and he booked them for like 3 days, and they all stayed in Atlantic Beach. There was a motel right out on the street, right where you turned in, and he would book the rooms there and lock it out for the group. And then another thing he did was on Sunday night, they'd stay over and play at Atlantic Beach. I was smaller than Kenneth Corbett, who was a comma mark. And I weighed about 120 pounds. I'm with Cecil. We're up there on these Sunday nights, and this joint didn't have any windows, but so they had big muscle guys keeping them from jumping in and not paying. So they had to come through the door. And here is this huge black guy. There are 2 whites there, Cecil and me. And so this the guy says, Cecil says, now you count the money. So I got the clicker. Not the money, I got the clicker. They're going to handle the money. They work the deal with Cecil through the motel. And all the big groups would play there on a Sunday night. Not free whiskey, but everybody had a half pint. It was wide open, wide open Atlantic Beach on Sunday night. And so he comes up there the first night. There must be 200 people in there, hot as hell, sweating and having a big old time. And at my count, he came up and said, man, how we doing? I said, well, here, Cecil, it's like 122. 122 my ass, there's 200 people in here. I said, yeah, but you see this thumb of mine? He said, yeah. That guy told me if I didn't quit clicking that thing, I wasn't going to have a thumb. So I did that with him. And then as far as your daddy, nobody helped me more in my life than your daddy. Before the Rolling Stones were here, we met at North Myrtle Beach. He opens up the trunk and he says, here's the T-shirts we're going to do now. Start printing. And I did a lot of it. When he did those big concerts, I do the T-shirts. And so I looked down and I said, well, nobody's going to buy this. This says Rolling Stones. He said, yeah, that's exactly what it says. It says, tomorrow morning, you're going down to TGR, to the convention center, and we're going to announce that the Rolling Stones are coming to town.
I said, well, what about the T-shirts? He said, oh, there's yours. We'll work a deal out. I said, okay. So I go get all my lifeguards, and I said, now, I want you to be here at 7 a.m. I know none of you want to be here at 7 a.m. You want to be in bed or whatever. I said, I got something I'm going to take you to do. So I got all my lifeguards. I had 24 of them. And the tickets were $10 a piece. I gave them all a $20 bill. And I said, now come on over to the convention center and buy tickets. We're going to see the Rolling Stones. I go, oh, God, man, they don't get us up this morning for this. There's no Rolling Stones coming here. I said, yeah, come on. Now, Dingus got a little bit of the story wrong.
Hey, I'm a liar, and don't you ever forget it.
Here's what happened. He was the man that was set up. But I got my people there and got in line, and you could get 2 tickets and $20, and then I would, they'd come and I'd take the money back. I mean, I'd give them out 1 ticket, they get back in line again. At the end, I had 300 tickets. And nobody's believing this guy. The Rolling Stones are here. Come on down here to the convention. We couldn't, nobody was coming. They said, well, they could just make it up some story. And then the word got going, and it took like 3 hours to sell the Rolling Stones out at the convention center because of Deacon. Now, not really. I mean, who's going to believe that? Yes, sir.
It took about 15 minutes because I drove from Bishopville, and when I got there, it was sold out.
All right. Well, that's about from Bishopville. That'd be about right.
About 2 weeks later, I ran into Cecil. I told him that. He said, well, why don't you go down there? You knew I had tickets for you.
Well, your daddy got me my start. I used those 300 tickets with TGR and Bill Hennessy. Those guys gave me my start into SunCal products, and I used those tickets for that show for every radio station, for every charity, for every promotion, and I had a company, Panama Jack, and he launched my career. Your daddy did, and we did a lot of things together, and all those people, I can't even tell you. All I can tell you is I'm busy knocking those things up on the post, except when you put the hot nuts up, the cops can take them down. So I didn't put the hot nuts up till after the cop had gone to bed, because back then there were 4 beaches, you know, and they all had a cop, you know, starting at Windy Hill Crescent and Myrtle Beach and North and Cherry Grove, and so I had to work around the cops, and Cecil said, now, don't worry about old Charlie there at Ocean Drive. Said, hell, he goes to bed at 7 o'clock. What about the nighttime? I go, okay, Cecil. But Cecil always had the angle. But Charlie was the sweetheart. And I grew up with all the Corbett's. And Vicky was a little girl. Kenneth worked for me. And I'm not kidding you, he did not weigh 110 pounds. And so he said, I want a job. And I'm looking down at him, and I'm not big. And I said, well, what can you do? I can do anything you want me to do. I said, all right, here's the deal. It's 25 cents to play miniature golf, and a hot dog's 15 cents. 2 people are going to play golf, and one of them wants a hot dog. And they give you a $1 bill. How much change you going to give me back? He said, I'm going to give you back 35 cents, a quarter, and a dime. When do I start? I said, right now. And so then I said, well, you can't see over the counter. He said, yeah, I can. He went out my junkyard back there, got 2 Pepsi wooden crates, you remember? Turned them upside down, and he'd stand on those. He literally couldn't see over the counter. And then he'd watch all my lifeguards. Oh, they hated him. He told on them every day. And one guy said, you know, I may go to jail, but I'm going to kill that little son of a gun. I said, don't you touch my boy. And some nights, he'd work with me till the very end at night, and he didn't go to the beach club, and I would take him home on 71st Avenue, and I would honk the horn. He's sound asleep. I would pick him up in my arms and take him to the door, and there's Lorraine waiting on him with this big-ass German Shepherd that did not like me. That dog did not like me, I can tell you right now. But I literally hand Kenneth to his mother, and the next day he'd be right there at work. And boy, I was always nice to Lorraine, because when she brought his dinner, every now and then she'd bring me a dinner. And so I know the whole family. And Chuck was my dentist all my life. He thinks it's because he's a Corbett. No, my daddy told me, said, son, whenever you look for a dentist, if you can find one that's a fisherman, that's the guy you want because they're good with their hands. And he fishes more than he dentistry. And David, David was the guy that was always working all the time, and so I didn't get around him too much. But I've known all the Corbett's and grew up with all the Corbett's. They're all fine people. No, they're better than fine people. They're great people. They never cheated anybody. They never stole, and they always did what they said they would do. And I'm glad to call them my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Would anyone else like to make a little comment before we close?
Just one comment.
Sure.
And it's about Cecil and Charlie. I used to see a lot of people come to the beach club, and they'd get out there, and they were on a date, maybe Mullins or Fair Bluff or someplace like that. And they would look and see what the price was to get in. And you got to remember, in 1966, 65, $10 was a lot of money. $5 was a lot of money. But they would get out there, and they would realize, I'm down here on a date, and I told this girl I was going to buy her something to eat, and I'm going to be short. And they were embarrassed. And they would make up an excuse like, I think we better go. And they would start to walk off from the beach club. And as they did, Cecil would follow them out into the parking lot. And this is the one thing I learned from him, and I used it a couple other places when I put some shows on. This. You're leaving. Yes, I am. I don't have enough money. Cecil, he didn't want to admit that to his girlfriend. And Cecil would say, hey, come on in, you pay me next time. And it was amazing that the next week when they came back, they would always ask, and you'd know they owed the money from the last time. They would say, is Mr. Corbett here? And he would walk out, and they would say, here's what I owe you from last time. And Cecil's last question would be, do you have enough money to get in tonight? But that in itself made Cecil a real human being.
I've had these for all the years, because I used to change the marquee. These are the original The Beach Club letters. That's been what? 50, 60, 70 years?
Not 70.
70. Close.
Well, this has been a very, very humbling experience for our family. Karen and I and our brothers and others have been sort of nervous about the whole thing because obviously we don't really, we're sort of humble, but we also are not so humble. But in any event, it's just a great privilege for us to be able to be here with y'all. Thank you for your care for our family. Thank you for the very kind words that you've spoken, and we wish you the best. And again, these memories will never fade from ours.
Jesus Christ Superstar was performed at the Beach Club.
Yes, it was. I don't remember what year. Was that 72?
I think it was at the very last of 71 or 72.
71 or 72.
Because my sister and I actually sat on the walk-in cooler so we could see it better.
Yeah.
They didn't have their costumes.
They
just
performed at the
sat
street
there
clubs.
and played in the street clubs because their costumes didn't make it or such a bus or whatever. And Jesus Christ Superstar.
But it was the Broadway.
It was incredible.
Beautiful. One last thing before we go, I'd like to share with you the Chapin Memorial Library South by Southeast Music Fest on Friday, May 8th is coming. That's going to be a great event here. And then the following day, the act is going to take place at the train depot. Sammy, you want to say a couple of quick things
I'm
about
Sam Hanford, and like everybody here, Cecil and the Beach Club changed my life. I don't know if we're good or bad, maybe a combination of two, but music's been my passion, my hobby, and for a little while my living. And I worked with Cecil through record stores and record labels, etc. Anyway, 20-something years ago, a very good friend of mine named Jeff Roberts and I and another 10 or 12 people put together South by Southeast Music Feast to have music at the old train station, and we're a 501c3 charity. We raise money and we get instruments in the kids' hands that can't afford them. In the aspect of music education, we have Reverend Billy C. Works coming, who is a crazy man, who will be here on May 8th to do what we call the Chitlin Circus. It's a video he's going to show. He's going to play music for a bit. Then we have some panel of just some of these local people here today. We're going to discuss how the Chitlin Circuit impacted us along with Ocean Drive, beach music, the beach club. Hopefully you guys can come join us. It's called the Chitlin Circuit, a musical journey to Charlie's Place, Beach Club, OD, and more. It'll be right here. It's free. That's on Friday, May 8th at 2:30. I got handouts right here if you see me on the way out. The following night on Saturday, we're going to have Reverend Billy play a free concert, open at 5. And this guy is like a cross between Robin Williams, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Mark Russell. He's just crazy. He plays boogie woogie and blues piano. He's a musicologist. They put this Chitlin Circuit video together down in Florida. They've been showing it in colleges down there. It's going to be something else, and it's free. And if you don't have a good time, we'll give you your money back. I want to thank Jennifer here. She does a great job. Y'all give some love to Jennifer. And this great staff here. Right? Thank you so much.
If everyone would just give one last warm round of applause to the Corbett's. This has been so wonderful. It's been our time to be able to have this information about the beach house and the family contributions for years to come. Thank you so much.
That was very nice.